Hello.
Hi.
My name is Aaron Stark. This is my story. I was almost a school shooter. In 1996, Denver, Colorado, as a student at North High, I almost committed a terrible atrocity. I learned early on growing up that there's a strange comfort and calmness in darkness. Sometimes even the most chaotic and violent settings can become normal, can become your everyday, and that can become extremely damaging. Growing up, I had a very chaotic childhood. We moved around at least 40 or 50 different times. It's new school every single month, it seemed. My parents were criminals. There would be drug addicts running from place to place, running from the police. So every now and then we'd get woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning by a knock on the door telling everybody, hurry up, get all your stuff, get in the truck, we need to go right now before the cops get here. Jump in the truck, drive all the way across the country, get into a new school, do it all again a couple weeks later. I went to over 30 different schools before high school and then another 10 at high school. And it was, the one thing I learned over all that time is the one constant is there's always a new set of bullies, especially when you were like me and didn't really have a stable place to stay, so you never really had a stable shower, you never really had clean clothes. I never really smelled good. I was an introvert. I liked comic books, but kids didn't like comic books that much, back before superheroes were cool. I was fat, I was smart, and that made me get picked on just about everywhere I went. Bullies at school would come up to me and mind that they were going to shoot me with a harpoon, like I was a whale. They'd drop some food on my head because they would tell me I was too fat. Around everybody would call me Pugs the Addict and run around me in circles. But the bullying at school kind of paled in comparison to what happened at home. I was told I was worthless just about every day of my life from everyone that was around me. One thing I learned is, when you're told you're worthless enough, you're going to believe it. Then you're going to do everything you can to make everybody else around you agree with it too. And I did. I wrapped that darkness around me like a blanket, used it as a shield to keep everybody away. I kept my house purposefully completely filthy. I lived in filth on purpose because everybody told me that I was already worthless. I might as well do that. In life, there's good people and bad people. I learned early on that I was one of the bad people, so I was going to do everything I could to make that story true. Right around 14, 15 years old, I got into cutting because I didn't really have very much more emotion that I could control in my world. Everything was chaos, everything was pain. My drug-addicted family was constantly fighting. Leaving for my real dad of youth, who was so violent that we called it movie of the week level violence. Seeing things like my mom get beaten and raped in front of me, and then get beaten with a tire iron afterwards, and have him laugh over it. And then to have that same woman 20 years later try to stab me with a knife and tell me that I'm horrible because I look just like him. After my real dad disappeared, right around 5 years old, my stepdad replaced the absolute movie of the week level violence with something that's akin to a Scarface, drug abuse and crack cocaine, and learning how to rock up crack right in the middle of the living room, then how to cut it up and sell it to all the neighborhood people. Learning that stealing and lying was the way to do everything. I was taught all the tools in life on how to deal with everybody around me, but I was taught the exact wrong way to do it. I was taught that lying was the way to get what I wanted. Or if I needed to fight somebody to get that I would fight. I was very aggressive and very angry. I was more angry at myself. I hated myself. So, the only control I could do, all this chaos, everything swirling around me, I had control over my own body. Cutting became my source of comfort. I would slice into my skin and I would feel that I would have at least some bit of normalcy and some bit of reality. Because it's really strange that in the middle of that swirling maelstrom of chaos, even the most intense pain is some kind of comfort. Because like I said, darkness can be very comforting. I ended up being homeless around 16, 17 years old. My chaotic family, I long ago had left their house because I got tired of beating up my stepdad because he was beating up my mom. So I got tired of dealing with all of that, and then getting beat up by her because I jumped in the middle of a fight. So I'm homeless, living on the streets, thinking I pushed all of my friends away, and mostly on purpose, by either being completely disgusting or by stealing their belongings and ruining them, or by lying to them and telling them things that completely aren't true, or just making up bizarre stories about what's going on to make everybody realize that I don't have a grasp on reality. I ended up staying in one of the few friends I had left. He had a shed in the back of his house. I ended up staying in that shed a couple nights. My arm scratched up with cuts, laying in this chair. It was completely gray and dingy, covered in cobwebs and bugs. The roof of this tool shed that I'm sleeping in has giant holes in the top of it, rain pouring in on top of me, and I'm dripping blood on the floor. And I think I have to do something or I'm going to die. I'm going to end up killing myself. So I did the only thing I could think of to do. I called social services. I got on the phone, I made an appointment to go to social services. They called me in the next day. I got bus fare from my friend's mom. I went down to the office. But when I arrived there, it wasn't just me that got there. They also had called in my mom. And even though during the meeting I had pulled out a bloody razor blade and threw it on the table, and when they asked me what my problem was, I said, that's my problem right there. They didn't listen to me. They sent me home with her. And on the drive home with her, she turned to me and she said, next time you should do a better job and I'll buy you the razor blades. My heart got ripped completely out of me then. That darkness that I've been wearing staring into all that time, I ran headlong into it. If they're going to think that I'm terrible and I'm the evil one, then I'm going to do it. I ended up being completely manipulative, gathering whole groups of friends to lie and steal for me, so not just doing it for myself. I got rid of every bit of caring I possibly had. I was at my wit's end. A couple weeks later, suicidal again, because what do I have to live for? When you have nothing left to live for, you have nothing to lose. When you have nothing to lose, that's a terrifying thought. You can do anything. That's not fun. A couple weeks later, I'm feeling suicidal again. I try to go get myself some more help. I know the end's coming. I couldn't do it. When I warned them, they brought in my mom. I got to find some way to do it. Across the street from my high school was a building that said mental health on the top. I didn't quite know what it was for. I didn't know if they had a doctor there, but I just knew it said mental health. So I knew that there must be somewhere that they could help me. So I went inside and asked for help, talked to a therapist. This little 23-year-old woman sat down and talked to me. And because over my life I had a hobby of reading psychology books, I knew what I was talking about. She was obviously new. She didn't quite know what she was doing. She didn't really listen to me. And because the last therapist that met me, she also didn't believe that I was a threat, and she sent me home. So my second time of trying to get help, on screaming on my own, fell on completely deaf ears. And as I walked out into that building, I walked headlong into the abyss. That was it. I had lost all hope. Then I discovered something that's really strange. When you're at the bottom of the barrel, everything gets really calm. Everything gets really quiet. There's no more emotion. There's nothing left to feel. There's nothing left to hurt. I decided I was going to take out my frustration. I was invisible. No one had listened to me for years, but they were going to hear me now. I had known some people down by the school that were gangbangers. They always hung out at the school. They had seen me at the school too. I was never really in class, but I was always at the school. I was never actually attending, but I had nowhere else to go during my day, so I was at the class. They had sold drugs to my family. I had seen them back and forth, so they knew that I was not a narc or anything. We were on first name basis, but not anything more than that. But I also knew that they had access to guns. I knew that they could get guns, and because they always talked about it. A couple of them brought guns to school before that time. Remember, this is 1996, back around when the Bloods and the Crips were still rather prevalent in North Denver. So I went up to him and I said, hey, can you give me a gun, preferably one that shoots a lot of bullets? And the guy said, yeah, sure. Give me an ounce. I was like, okay, cool. Give me a couple days. That was it. I was going to get a gun. I was going to kill a whole lot of people, either at the school or at a mall food court. And it really didn't really matter to me which target it was. I had thought of both those targets, not because I was taking it on those particular people, because that's the most amount of people in the smallest amount of time, doing the most amount of damage, with the least amount of security. And people even these days will say, well, isn't that an argument you should arm students, or arm teachers, and you should harden the schools? None of that would have stopped anything. There was an armed guard at North High the entire time. There was armed police in the building. None of that was any deterrent to me whatsoever. I was going to kill myself. Having an armed guard there would not have stopped me one bit, because it didn't. So, as I'm waiting, I'm thinking, I'm in the abyss, there's nothing left. But thankfully, I wasn't entirely alone. That friend who had been staying in that shed, he saw that I was in that place, and he didn't leave my side. He called me over and took me to his house, and instead of treating me like I'm some kind of damaged piece of meat that needs to be thrown to the side, he showed me that I was a human. Treated me like I was a person. I didn't feel human at all. And when you're treated like you're a person, when you don't feel human one bit, it changes your entire perspective on everything. He showed me that it wasn't the overbearing, can I do something for you? Can I fix you? There's a program I can get you in. It was literally sitting down next to me, giving me a meal and showing me it was a Tuesday. Just showing me I was normal. I ended up not getting the gun. I ended up not doing the tragedy because I found something to live for. If you see someone that's feeling that you think is in that spot that needs that love, give it to them. Even if you don't like them, even if they pushed you away, a simple smile might actually change their whole world. Could save a lot of lives that you never know that you touch. Kindness is the easiest thing we can give. And we have to give love to the people we think deserve it the least. They need it the most. And it'll help us just as much as it helps them. This big dangerous trend, we're going to arm the schools, and we're going to arm teachers, we're going to harden all the security. We're going to look at all the kids that might be threats and turn them into the FBI. What's that going to happen to a kid who was in the position I was in 25 years ago, who's sitting there alone and hurting and in pain, and instead of getting help, he gets turned into the FBI and gets turned into a threat. And that one day of depression turns into a lifetime of pain and legal trouble. Kindness is the only way we're going to get out of this. It's the real only bipartisan issue. We all have this kind of pain, just at different levels. Please, give love to people you think deserve it the least. Thank you. So, that's the first half. That's the depressing part. So right after Parkland, a couple days after Parkland, I wrote that as a Facebook post. I wrote just a quick one. I was almost a school shooter. We need to give love to people we don't deserve it. And I didn't write it for me. I didn't write it for public consumption. I wrote it because my daughter and my wife, who were sitting right over there, they were asking each other, how could someone get to that point? And how could someone feel that way? And sadly, I understood. So I just wrote it as a quick post. That got some attention because evidently it connected. Got the attention of my local news. They came and did a video on me. That got 16 million views. I got to do a Washington Post article. Last month I did a TED Talk on this. I've been trying to spread this kindness and getting messages from all over the globe. And I don't say any of this to brag. This is not me trying to brag, like, oh, I'm so cool. This is just showing that I've lived with this my entire life. This is my normal. I'm not scared about talking about my past. It hurts every time I do it. I can't do it without breaking down, as you guys can see. But I'm not afraid of any of the things that I went through. And if me speaking out can bring out people, I got a message from a guy in Pakistan who he couldn't talk about being bullied because it would literally cost him his life. But he sent me a giant message talking about everything, all the pain that he went through. If me talking about this can inspire people to share that with me, what can you talking about your pain if it makes you afraid? If you're scared about your past, what can you inspire to do it? Who might you bring out to talk? I've had CEOs of companies contact me. I've had celebrities. I've had the homeless. I've had every stratosphere, every political persuasion, every religion. We're in this state right now of this seemingly civil war that we're brewing, and the only thing that's going to stop it is knowing that the person across from us isn't some monster. They're just a person. And just because we might not like what they say or might not like what they've done, we need to look at them with respect and with love as a person. So, I just wanted to share the journey that I've been on beyond past tense. Say, if I can inspire what's come out of this, what can you inspire if you share some history too? Thank you all very much. Now I would like to do a Q&A or whatever. If you guys have any questions, I'll open it to the audience and take whatever you guys have to say. Yeah.
Can you describe your path after that moment? What happened and how did you end up like you are now?
It was a long journey. It was about 15 years of solid recovery. I went through and confronted the people who hurt me, not to punish them and not to say you owe me or you need to pay, but just to let it be known that I acknowledge what happened and I can move past it, and that I'm going to be, all of the experiences I went through taught me lessons, either what not to do or what to do. Like I learned a lot from my parents. even though how terrible it was growing up with them, I learned a lot of what not to do with their kids. So my 17-year-old daughter tells everybody I'm her best friend. When I was 17-year-old, I wouldn't talk to my parents. So I won. So it just took a long time, a lot of, it's not a switch, not something you can just flip off just because you're nice. It's a long, hard struggle. Yeah.
What are the lives of your siblings been like?
Not so good. I have an older brother. He has a severe anger problem and drug problem. I have 2 younger sisters who went through some pretty severe abuse and neglect themselves. My stepfather just recently passed away a couple months ago. My mom's still alive. So it's not, I managed to get out, but I'm trying to get the rest of them. Most of my little sisters still talk to me. My brother and my mom do something. They don't talk to me about it. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Were you ever able to get appropriate therapy for yourself and your family?
I don't think so. I don't know if therapy was the route that would have helped me. I was a cocky, arrogant kid, and I knew a lot about psychology. And when you're like that, you tend to overtalk and weasel your way out of different therapies. It's hard to have it stick. I went to a bunch of different therapy, and I found it was more helpful to do my own therapy. But that's just me. That's not an advice for anybody else. So. All right. Well, thank you very much. That was my presentation.
I just like to comment really quick. There's a painting behind there. I can't really see a lot of it, but it kind of reminds me of what you were saying.
That there?
Freedom.
Yeah. I would agree. The freedom and the different animalistic nature of sometimes you have to fight your way out. It's not easy, it's not pretty, it's dark and it's hard. But it's not, I purposefully avoid certain things like, I avoid saying gun control and I avoid saying mental health. Because I found that both of those have so many preloaded presupposition and arguments from the other side that it completely destroys the actual subject. So instead of saying I had mental health problems, I say I was depressed and worthless, felt worthless because I was told I was worthless. Or instead of saying that we need gun control, that instead we need to make sure that a kid who feels depressed and worthless can't get his hands on a rifle. It's the specificity that takes it out of the giant realm that makes everybody already have an argument to stop it.